So the African American experience here in the Chesapeake region, like some of the most famous abolitionists, some of the most famous activists were born and raised right here in the Chesapeake Bay area, right here on the Eastern Shore, and in some cases right here in Kent County.
Yeah, so the presentation about African American contributions to the Chesapeake region's history is something that we've really wanted to do for a while, and we were waiting for the right partner organization because we wanted to make sure we were being inclusive with multiple points of view. And particularly when you're talking about African American history, you want to involve members of the African American community in telling their own story. So the CV Star Center was collaborating with us on some walking tours that we were doing around Chestertown, where we would highlight, Jane's Church, Bethel Church, other landmarks that have been historically very important to our local African American community. And through that collaboration, we mentioned hey, we've really wanted to do a presentation about this topic on our digital map, but we've always needed a partner that has gravitas, and they certainly have it. So it was really wonderful being able to collaborate with folks like Jalen Money and Darius Johnson and Airlie Ringgold Johnson and folks from that community that have lived experience. They have relatives that have been here in some cases for many generations. Also Adam Goodhart, who's just a wealth, a fountain of knowledge on that topic as well. And so it was really great to be able to work collaboratively with them, and we basically kind of came up with a storyline and then worked to find images and topics that worked well with the map of the Bay. So you can't just throw a bunch of images together with that particular platform because it's tied to the map. So we were like, how can we find topics that tie to certain points of interest on the Bay itself? And that was like the starting point. And then the other thing about that story is it's a painful story in many instances. It starts off with the arrival of enslaved Africans to the region, but then we end with a slide of Barack Obama, an African American president. So my hope is that, yes, it tells the painful parts of the story, but it's not a story without successes and joys involved as well. Things like the Uptown Club, things like, people resisting, like the Freedom Riders, and the personalities that rose to lead people for equal rights. And, I think hopefully the way we end the show, we end with an uplifting message, but we also acknowledge that we still have a lot of work to do with, race relations, not just in Chestertown, but writ large in America. We've only shown this a couple times in public, so we showed it to our local 5th grade students during Black History Month and combined a presentation on the map with actually walking in the field here in Chestertown and looking at examples of, hey, this place used to be segregated, now everybody's welcome, things like that, like the Garfield Center or Sumner Hall, a great story of free Africans advocating for themselves, building their own, meeting house, stories like that. So initially it was targeted for our local students. We also want to show it to other organizations that are really involved in this kind of work, like Sumner Hall is a great example. We may show it at Legacy Day. We may show it at Downrigging Weekend. So the audience is students and the general public, really anybody that's interested in learning more about really the full history of the region. Yes. Yeah, that's kind of an untold or less publicized part of the story, is that the water in particular, especially, during and shortly after the Civil War, was a huge employment center for African American watermen. Generally, the gentlemen would be on the water, and a lot of times the packing houses were entirely employed with immigrants and African Americans. They were doing the picking of the crabs and the shucking of the oysters. So the water, there's a really rich African American waterman's heritage in the region that I think the numbers are definitely way down from what they were, so it's not something that rises to the forefront of people's minds in the modern day. But that was a place where African Americans could be their own boss. They could have their own boats. They could hire their own crew. And if you were the guy that could get the most oysters, you could make the most money. So it was one of those few areas of opportunity for Black residents in the region to really, be their own boss and improve their status in life and make a little money and feed their families. Yeah, so we have a whole separate digital map presentation about the story of Native people here in the region that starts back 13,000 years all the way to the present day. And again, with Native Americans, we've worked with a lot of local tribal groups, especially during like 2007 when we were doing our shallop voyage reenactment. We worked with a lot of local tribal members. So yeah, we show that every year at Downrigging to the public. We show elements of it to a lot of school groups that come through. I just did a lecture literally last night out at our preserve about Native Americans in the region. So again, we're just trying to like really fill in the whole story so that it's not just a bunch of Caucasian folks out on the bay. Like this has been a melting pot for literally thousands of years. And a lot of those stories are less publicized than others. So we want to kind of fill in those gaps when we can. And it's also just fascinating material. It's stuff that a lot of people, with African American history, you could walk up and down High Street or Cross Street or Cannon Street and have no idea about the background of some of these buildings. And they're just really fascinating stories to tell, in addition to being important stories. So it's a great thing to share with the community.